Coming up with an interesting blues rhythm guitar part can be a bit of a head scratcher when you're first starting out. Often I see players stuck with the classic Chuck Berry style rhythm guitar parts. And while that's certainly cool, you don't want to be limited to only that. So today I'm going to show you a few tips and tricks to liven up your blues rhythm guitar playing. So we're going to get into a few different chord types today. These are what I consider must-know chord voicings for the blues. First, we're going to cover a few 9th chord voicings, and then we'll dive into some 13th chord voicings. And along the way, we'll discuss some concepts to keep in mind when you're coming up with rhythm guitar parts. First, let's dive into these 9th chord voicings. So today we're in the key of G, and this first chord voicing is a rootless G9 voicing. The notes are B, F, A, and D. That's the major third, flat 7, 9, and 5th. And when the bass player puts a G on the bottom, you get this beautiful G9 sound. Now the chord voicing we're going to use for C9 is this voicing. And this is C, E, B flat, D, and G on top. So that's the root, major third, flat 7, 9, and 5th on top. And then for our 5 chord D9, we can slide this voicing up a whole step, and we get D, F sharp, C, E, and A. And we can connect those two chords together chromatically by a half step with that little passing chord. And then we're back to our G9 chord. So now let's play a very simple rhythm part along to the backing track with just these chords. And rhythmically, I'm going to play accents on beat 1 and the and of beat 2. So now we can use these chords and this simple rhythm pattern as a launching off point for coming up with more interesting rhythm guitar parts. So first thing I'm going to do is add a little fill to these chords, and this is going to happen on beat 4 of the first measure, and this is going to make our rhythm guitar part a 2-bar phrase. So this little fill I'm doing is just a D major triad. So G, C, and E, and then going down to the top part of a G7 chord, right? So F, B, and D. And I'm going to hammer on to that B from a half step below. So from B flat to B. And as we move to the 4 chord, the C9, I'm going to do a similar fill, but I'm going to leave that B flat in there because that B flat is in the C9 chord. So now let's play this down to the backing track. We're going to use our same basic rhythm template and our same 9th chord voicings, but with this added fill. Alright, right, so let's add another fill to this. Let's add something to the beginning of the measure. This will give us a more robust, full-sounding rhythm guitar part. And what we're going to do here is actually a rhythmic pickup that starts on beat 3 of the previous measure. And all we're going to do is alternate between E and G. We'll do something like this. Right, so all I'm doing is a little rhythmic pickup to lead us into the top of the 2-bar phrase. And as we go to the 4 chord and to the 5 chord, all I'm going to do is modify it. I'm going to go E, G, E, and then instead of going back to G, I'm just going to go down to the root of the C chord and then the root of the D chord. All right, so let's hear how this sounds along to the backing track. I'll play the same rhythm part as before, but now with this second added fill. So the great thing about learning these different chord grips is now we can move them around the fretboard. So this voicing that we used for C9 and D9 down here, we can easily slide that up and use it for a G9 voicing up the 10th fret. And that's going to give us G, B, F, A, and D, or the root, 3rd, flat 7, 9, and 5th in the key of G. And then we can pair that with a C9 voicing. If we take this rootless G9 voicing and just slide it up, now we get a great C9 voicing right here. And that's going to be E, B flat, D, and G, with a major 3rd, flat 7, 9, and 5th of a C9 chord. And then we can move that up a whole step and we get our D9. So now we've got our 1, 4, and 5 chords in a different position. So now I'm going to play this along to the backing track, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a very simple rhythm part with just these chords, and I'm going to do that same rhythm that we've been keeping with the beat 1 and the end of 2. I'm going to do that one time around, and then the second time around I'm going to add our fills in there, our little E, G, E fill, and our little D triad thing. And I'm going to play them in the same position, but then I'm going to jump up here to grab the little chord jabs. And you can see how this just gives it a different sound, and it opens up the fretboard to playing some different types of rhythm parts. So here we go. So the other essential chord type that we need for blues rhythm playing is our 13th chord voicings. And we're going to cover 2 different grips just like we did with the 9th chords. This first one is a G13 down in this position. And this is F, B, E, and G on top. So that's the flat 7, major 3rd, the 13, the note E, and then the root on top. And then we can pair this with this C13 voicing here, which is B flat, E, A, and C. That's the flat 7 on the bottom, the major third, the 13, and the root on top. And then we can slide that up a whole step and we get C, F sharp, B, and D. That's the flat 7, major third, 13, and root of a D13 chord, right? So there's our 13th chord voicings. Now I'm going to use these voicings the same way I did on the previous example. I'm going to comp just the chords using our basic rhythm template, and then I'm going to use these chords and add our fills in there, the same fills we played in the previous examples. And you can hear how this 13th chord has a little bit of a brighter sound. It's a really nice, useful sound, but just different options, different tools to use in your toolbox of chords for blues rhythm playing. So just like we did with the 9th chords, we can now move these same chord grips up the fretboard. So instead of playing our G13 down in this position, we can play the same thing up in this different spot. And that's going to give us F, B, E, and G. The flat 7, major third, 13, and root of a G13 chord. And then we can pair that with this voicing for C13. This is the same chord grip that we use down here for G13, but now we're just moving it up to cover the C13 chord. And that's going to give us B flat, E, A, and C, the flat 7, major third, 13, and root of a C13 chord. And then we can move that same thing up a whole step to cover our D13. And that's going to give us C, F sharp, B, and D, the flat 7, major third, 13, and root of a D13 chord. So just like I did in the previous examples, I'm going to play a simple comping pattern using just these chord voicings, and then I'll play them along with our fills, and you can see how these have a really nice, really bright sound, and just extend your knowledge of chord voicings around the fretboard. So hopefully these new chord voicings open up your ears to some new possibilities when coming up with rhythm guitar parts. Of course, once you get comfortable playing these in the different positions, you can start mixing it up and combining them together in different ways to be creative and come up with parts of your own. All of the tabs and notation for this lesson, along with this backing track, are going to be available over on my Patreon site. I'm going to leave you here by just playing a couple of times to the backing track, just playing freely some rhythm stuff and kind of combining some of the different elements that we covered in the lesson, moving the chords around the fretboard a little bit to kind of give you an insight on how I actually use this stuff when I'm really playing and comping rhythm. So until next time, take care and happy practicing.